How are you doing? It is Saturday afternoon. I am in Brooklyn. I am happy to be chatting with you. It's nice and warm outside, 50 degrees, which for December is pretty good. It's been freezing lately, but we got a nice warm day. I'm wearing my light jacket. I'm not even wearing my winter coat. I'm happy, you're happy, we're all happy. And I've got my phone charging as we're speaking, so hopefully it doesn't abruptly end. We're just gonna have a nice live here. Got daylight for a little while longer, and so I figured I'd walk around and have a chat with folks about what's going on in the world, ideology, politics. I wanna let you know that I did just make a video before I did this about the fall of Silicon Valley. Now, I'm not going to say too much about it on this live because I want you to watch the other video I made. But the fall of Silicon Valley. So, in a little bit, there'll be a video posted about the fall of Silicon Valley. If that interests you, shout out. So, hey, Ronnie Miller, good to see you. Who else is on there? Shout out. Let's have a conversation. Let's make this an interactive live. No need to just have me monologue on here. Comsamal says, hey, hey, hey. Well, hey to you, Comsamal. Thomas Tarrant says, hey, good to talk to you, Thomas. What's happening? Just in this lovely Brooklyn, borough of Brooklyn. Richie the Fork says, hey, Caleb, I think you are really talking about a chance walking about. I'm not sure what that means, but hey, what the hell. So, what's going on here, folks? Lovely afternoon. I did want to tell folks, you know, if you watch the news lately, it seems like the world is moving in a direction. Go interview the next person you see. Well, not going to do that. That's anti-imperialism suggests I do that. Good suggestion, though, but I'm not going to do that. I think that would be weird. You know, you can't just walk up to people randomly and be like, hey, you're on live. All kinds of people are watching you. Tell me what you think. You know, that would be a little bit weird, you know? That's not my style particularly, but hey, what do I know? Taking the chance, Caleb, to stay safe. Hey, what can you do? What can you do? But anyhow, I wanted to kind of check in with folks because there's a lot on people's minds lately. And, you know, I gotta say that if you look at the way the U.S. government is acting right now, with Maria Butina, with the head of, with Meng, the head of Huawei, the biggest telecommunications manufacturer in the world, it's pretty awful. I mean, they're basically just grabbing people, you know, like grabbing prominent women, right? Real honorable. Just grab a prominent woman in order to help your trade deals and negotiations. I mean, you know, Maria Butina, right? After 6 months being held in federal custody, 6 months, a lot of time, you know, in solitary confinement, right? At one point, they were waking her up every 15 minutes. You know, and after all this time, she's come forward, and what has she pled guilty to? What has she pled guilty to? Did she plead guilty to being a Russian spy, being part of a James Bond? No. Actually, she's pled guilty to being an unregistered lobbyist, that she apparently was trying to lobby Congress and on behalf of Russia or an entity in Russia, not necessarily the Russian government, and did not register. That's what they've charged Maria Butina. That's what she's pled guilty to. And you look at the headlines on CNN, and they're saying, admits to conspiracy against the United States. No. Admits to lobbying. Potentially talking, or attempting to talk to prominent people in the USA, and while doing it, not registering with the U.S. government as an official foreign agent lobbyist. That's what they got her for. And if you look at the way the media covers this story, it's like, it's so deceptive. I mean, she pled guilty to lobbying, right? And on top of that, is she even really guilty of that? I'm not convinced. Why? I think if you lock somebody in solitary confinement for 6 months, right, you wake them up every 15 minutes, you subject to someone to that kind of treatment. You know, it's not that hard to get them to confess to whatever you want them to. I mean, this is the American justice system. I don't know if folks are familiar. There was a case recently here in New York. Shout out to Lisa Hauserman. Good afternoon to you. But there's a case here in New York of a young man named Khalif Browder. I don't know if folks heard about this. He was a young African-American man, underage, you know, under 18, and they picked him up, and he was charged with some kind of crime, denied bail, and they held him for 2 years in Rikers Island in the facility awaiting trial. And each time they brought him to court for another hearing, they told him if he would plead guilty, they would let him go. But he didn't plead guilty because he didn't do it. And finally, after 2 years, a lot of which in solitary confinement, they finally released him. They said, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we didn't have anything on him. They released him. And lo and behold, he was so mentally ill after being, spending 2 years of his teen life in prison, and a lot of it in solitary confinement, he committed suicide. Got a lot of press. Khalif Browder, you can Google it. This is the American justice system, and it's funny because, at the time that the American Constitution was written, and I'm not going to get all patriotic here, but, at the time that the American Constitution was written, there was this practice, in British common law where, they would torture people to get to them to confess. You can read about some of the awful things, like for example, you have, if you refused to plead, if you didn't plead guilty or innocent, in British common law, they would press you. They would, put a bunch of stones on top of you until you entered a plead. And there's the famous case of Giles Corey. I don't know if people know who Giles Corey was, but during the Salem witch trials, he basically did not want to have his farm confiscated. He wanted to pass his farm on to his children. And he knew that he had no chance of basically being found innocent because it's the Salem witch trials. So he had no chance of being found innocent, but he knew if he never entered a plea, they could never convict him and then confiscate his property. So he laid there and they crushed him to death with these stones for refusing to enter a plea, right? And so he was crushed to death, but that way his children could inherit his farm. Pretty awful case, right? Giles Corey, his last words were more weight, as they were just putting stones on top of him, trying to get him to plead, right? This is the kind of thing that in the U.S. Constitution, at this point, the U.S. Constitution, a lot of what was written in it, like the right to a speedy jury trial, that was written in there to prevent this kind of thing, where, oh, we just take you to jail and torture you until you say you did it, right? And interestingly, the way it works is, from what I understand, I'm not a legal expert, please don't misinterpret me, but now I believe it's routine that when you've been arrested, that you then, one of the first things you do is waive your right to a speedy trial. Right? And then at that point, yeah, they can delay it, they can delay it, they can delay it. I mean, I remember when I was in Cleveland, I did some volunteering and some work around police brutality cases. And I saw this. I mean, families would just, it would just, the case would just go on and on and on and on. Just destroy people's lives. It's pretty sick. It's pretty awful. The American justice system is not that. It is not that at all. And if you look at the conviction rates, right, and they talk about the trial penalty, right, they do everything they can to get you to plead guilty, right? Just plead, right? Just plead. And then if you actually go to trial, then the sentence is much harsher, because how dare you actually exercise your right to be heard by a jury of your peers. They have the trial penalty, where they punish people for actually letting their case go to trial. Yeah. And then, catch this, the conviction rates in courts are astoundingly high. Juries almost always convict. The acquittal rates are just forget it. They don't acquit. They just don't do it, right? The prosecution has the upper hand. The American justice system is a farce. And it's funny because there's all this propaganda. It's like all the cop shows. Every cop show you've ever seen is about, the cops, the guy is guilty, the guy has committed some crime, but oh, this technicality, and the police can't arrest him. It's so awful. That doesn't happen. That rarely happens. What generally happens is the opposite. Is generally someone hasn't done it, and then they end up pleading guilty to something that they haven't done, or they go to trial, and the way the trial is set up, they get convicted because, police officers never lie, authority figures never lie, and jurors tend to be normal, true-believing people. That leads me to another point, right? While we're at it, why don't we talk about these other points, right? I try to leave my own feelings out of politics. You want to think rationally when it comes to political things, but every so often you get a little pet peeve, There's something that just kind of gets under your skin, right? There's just things in this world, those of us who are political, we think about different things that are right and wrong, but every so often there's something that just bothers you. It just gets in your craw, as they say. It bothers you. Shout out to Lisa, shout out to Jeremy Chase. But it gets in your craw. One of my biggest pet peeves One of my biggest pet peeves is people who can only get outraged when they have permission, right? And then they get self-righteous about it. Let me explain. So, I remember, like, the Iraq War. I was very opposed to the Iraq War, right? I thought it was just awful. I mean, and it's the horrendous results of the Iraq War just continue. I mean, it's a disaster. The United States bombed the shit out of Iraq. The country's been blown to bits. And as a result, we've still got, people, fleeing the country, a refugee crisis. There was the rise of ISIS. It's just a mess. No one in their right mind would think that Iraq is better off today than it was before. All the propaganda, Saddam Hussein did this, he was so evil. Well, nobody in their right mind would say that things got better since the USA liberated Iraq, right? And at the time the Iraq War was happening, I knew all kinds of people, who were opposed to it, right? And I would say to them, hey, there's an anti-war protest coming up. Why don't you go to the rally? Well, I can't do that. I'm not a protester. I don't want people to think I'm a protester. Somebody I know might not like it. I know somebody who's in the military, and oh my God, if they knew what I can't protest. Oh, I might make somebody mad. Oh, I might be like one of those crazy people on TV that protest. I can't protest. Oh my God. And it was like this weird thing. They couldn't possibly demonstrate against the Iraq War. They knew it was wrong. They're opposed to it, but oh my God, I don't want anyone to think I'm an activist or oh my God, but then, right, these folks that wouldn't lift a finger against the Iraq War because it might offend somebody or scare somebody. However, a lot of them, right, save Darfur, right, protest against the government of Sudan to save the Darfur region. And they'll protest, to save Darfur. Yes, absolutely. Oh, I saw those pictures of those African children and I just had to take a stand. And they would get all self-righteous and they'd be like, oh, we can't let the people of Darfur, I care so much about and it's like, you won't protest what your own government is doing. But you can protest against what a government on the other side of the world is doing, against what one of the poorest countries in the world, what their government is doing or allegedly doing. That cowardice annoys me. It just plain annoys me, right? People who only get outraged when they're allowed, when authority figures give them permission, right? Another example, right? Obama was president. Obama destroyed Libya, one of the most prosperous country in Africa at that point, the highest life expectancy on the African continent. He funded, quote-unquote, revolutionaries, aka terrorists, to tear up the place, NATO bombing. It was awful. Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. It was horrendous what Obama did in Libya. The protests against it, other than the Nation of Islam and some of the smaller communist groups, nobody said a word about it, right? And it was weird. It was an atrocious crime what was done to Libya. I mean, this was the most prosperous country in Africa, highest life expectancy, world's biggest irrigation system, all just blown to bits by Wall Street imperialism. Now things are, it's awful what was done to Libya. All these people could never protest against it, right? Well, it was CNN, and maybe it's wrong, I don't know, and, some of them knew it was wrong, and they just didn't do anything about it, because I don't want people to think I like Gaddafi, or some of them, well, Obama says, so maybe it's not wrong, I don't know. But then, I kid you not, the day after, not the day after, but the weekend after Donald Trump won the election, he hadn't even taken office yet. Right? Just after Donald Trump won the election, right? Had not taken office, had not done anything yet. He had campaigned and he'd won the election without even getting the majority of the popular vote. Donald Trump, and all of a sudden, I go into the subway station in Union Square, and there's just this endless number of Post-it notes. Everywhere, there's all these Post-it notes everywhere. Oh my God, and it's like this moral outrage. All these people who were silent when Obama bombed the shit out of Libya, right? The New York City Democratic Party establishment gave them permission to be morally outraged about Donald Trump, and all of a sudden, I'm taking a stand against Donald Trump. And it's like, I don't like Trump. I didn't vote for Donald Trump. But it's like, are you kidding me? Why do people only have political outrage when someone they perceive as being in charge of them or giving an authority gives them permission? It drives me absolutely crazy. It really does. It's like they can't possibly bring themselves to question what the government tells them. But then the second some authority figure says, that Donald Trump guy, CNN, the second CNN says it, they're like, yes, I've got permission, now and then there's this self-righteousness. Look at me, I'm taking a stand. No, you're not. You're doing what you're told. You're just being a sheep, right? But it's like, and then all of a sudden they want to claim that they're like taking this big moral stand. I don't get it. It gets on my nerves, right? I don't get it. I really don't get it. It drives me up the wall to see people, only question when they're given permission to. And you can go down the line. I mean, it's like, I'm not a fan of Trump, but all the people that were all of a sudden protesting and all that, and I think the sad thing is, a lot of them are genuinely mad about things in their life, right? I mean, they're mad about racism, they're mad about low wages, they're mad about all kinds of things. But they only protest it when the authority figure gives them permission, and then all the feelings they have just come rushing out of them. And it's like, why didn't you have the strength to voice your outrage before? Why didn't you have the strength to do some research and learn about what was actually going on? These people are psychologically weak. It's psychological weakness, right? And it's not really an issue of smart, stupid. It's not that. A lot of these people are very intelligent, but they're psychologically weak. They think as they are told to think, and they have a fear of the social consequences of possibly thinking outside the box. So yes, and a lot of the outrage and the people like crying when Trump won, these people aren't mad about Trump. They're mad about something else. But the establishment, the ruling elite, gave them permission to be upset about Trump. They feel like it's Armageddon, but they don't feel like it's Armageddon because of Trump. They feel like it's Armageddon because of low wages, because of a rising police state, because they are having trouble paying their bills, because they're in huge amounts of debt. But the authority figure said, you can feel outrage about Donald Trump. And so, lo and behold, that's right, he won, and they sobbed, and they went out and broke windows, and they put up a bunch of Post-it notes in the Union Square subway station. People have huge feelings, but they'll only allow themselves to feel them when the authority figure tells them to. I don't know if this will do any good. I don't know if anyone sees me as an authority figure. I don't know. I really don't know. But if you are one of those people who perhaps sees me as an authority figure, for whatever reason, I don't know why, I give you permission. Right here, right now. I, Caleb Maupin, give you permission to be angry at the billionaire monopolists, the Wall Street 1%, the financial elite that is destroying the future of the United States. I give you permission. You can be mad at Goldman Sachs. You can be mad at the Rockefellers. You can be mad at the DuPonts and the Carnegies. You can be mad at the billionaire global corporations, the banking elites. You can be mad at them. I give you permission, right? You don't have to, be mad at undocumented immigrants. You don't have to be mad at people that get food stamps or government assistance. You can be mad at the rich people that run the United States of America. I give you permission. You can be mad at the billionaires who have destroyed the world and are keeping the world poor so that Wall Street and London can stay rich. I give you permission. If you need permission from somebody to be mad at the folks that are really responsible for destroying our lives, I'm giving it to you. I give you that permission. I don't know if this does any good or not, but I am so tired of people that can only be mad when they're given permission by someone else. But if it helps, I give you permission. You are allowed to get angry at the ruling class, at the international global bourgeoisie, the big bourgeoisie that is destroying the future of humanity. I give you permission. I give you permission. You now have permission, as someone pointed out, the people who own the government. You have my permission to be angry at the ruling elite that is driving the global standard of living down. I wanted to mention, part of the way that this billionaire global monopolists have maintained their order, their power, is with the fossil fuel economy. All right? Rockefeller, what is that? That's Standard Oil. John D. Rockefeller, Standard Oil. And, BP, British Petroleum, HSBC Bank. It's with the oil-based economy, right? The fossil fuel economy has a way that they have kind of trapped the world, right? There are some parts of the fossil fuel economy that have become independent. You've got Russia, you've got Iran, you've got Venezuela. But overall, the international oil markets are cornered by Wall Street and London. So what are they really afraid of? what they're really afraid of is alternative energy. Fusion power, fusion energy, nuclear power, most especially the electric cars that are happening in China now. They're really afraid, right? The fact that China is just plowing forward with electric cars, with new energy vehicles, like they call them, terrifies the global ruling elite because it spells the end of their rule, right? If the world no longer is dependent on oil, a market that they have invested so much in cornering, they will lose. And that's why Made in China 2025 upsets the ruling elite so much. Made in China 2025, what is it? It's the Chinese government pouring huge amounts of resources into technology development. And no, it's not a plot for China to take over all the technology industries. In fact, it's the opposite. They reached out to the United States many times and asked the USA to join Made in China 2025. Bet you didn't know that. You'll never hear that on CNN. You'll never hear that on Fox. Trump will never mention it. That's true. The reality is China reached out to the United States and said, let's join Made in China 2025. Let's make it a joint operation. Let's have American scientists and technology researchers team up with Chinese scientists and technology researchers. They can work together and it'll be great. That was the idea. That was the plan. But lo and behold, so there you go. They want to hold back technology because the end of the fossil fuel world order, the end of the world based on oil and gas, ultimately that is the end. That is the end of the rule of the big bankers in Wall Street and in London. They are terrified of the new energy. They are terrified of advancing technology, right? The computer revolution spells their end, and they are trying to hold back history. Caleb, you were confusing the Belt and Road? No, I'm not confusing the Belt and Road. Now, the Belt and Road is a different program. The Belt and Road, One Belt, One Road initiative, is China's plan, and they're doing it for building infrastructure in developing countries. It's not about technology development. One Belt, One Road initiative is building infrastructure, and basically that's, you know, China going to developing countries and building hospitals, schools, high-speed railway. It's very, very exciting. And right now, the most essential part of the Belt and Road, at this point, the most essential part of it is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC. That's very, very important, right? China sees Pakistan, with its ocean access to Central Asia, as just a mechanism for lighting up all of Central Asia. If Pakistan can get fully developed and industrialized, right? If you can start building high-speed railways and trains through Pakistan, new highways, if Pakistan can be just fully developed, that then gives ocean access to Afghanistan, to Kyrgyzstan, all of that, right? And I mean, it's not just the Belt and Road. I mean, you've also got the Eurasian Economic Union, which is led by Russia. If Pakistan can really light up, right, and just really become a hub of manufacturing and development and computers, if Pakistan can light up with its ocean access, right, that can be a big change for that entire region, for all of Central Asia and for Eurasia itself. It's huge if Pakistan can light up. So right now there is a huge, huge effort, you know, in the aftermath of the election of Imran Khan, right, of a president, a populist president in Pakistan. There is a huge, huge effort to try and prevent Pakistan and China from continuing to collaborate. That's going on. And the fact that we saw a terrorist attack in Pakistan on a Chinese consulate, the fact that Saudi Arabia is going into overdrive, pushing the stuff about the Uyghurs and the alleged persecution of Uyghur Muslims in the Chinese Islamic provinces, you know, they really want to stop the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. They want to stop it. They want to put a stop to it. That's what's going on. Because the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is the linchpin for completely transforming the situation in Central Asia. Completely transforming it, and really just, I mean, this is the beginning of a new era on the Eurasian subcontinent, or on the Eurasian hemisphere. So that's kind of my analysis of what's going on. You know, that's not to say there aren't issues. You know, there have been problems in the past, absolutely, with how Uyghur Muslims are treated in China. And maybe there still are. I'm sure, you know, I mean, to some degree, I know that, for example, I've read that in China they restrict, you can't have a big long beard. If you have a big huge beard, that's considered to be a sign of being a jihadist or something. Well, you know, I mean, I personally, if it was up to me, but then again, I'm not there, I don't know, but if it was up to me, I feel like people can have whatever kind of beard they want, you know, but I'm not in that situation, I'm not there, I don't know. So, you know, there could be things that are going wrong, but at the same time, the efforts to inflame Muslims around the world to hate China, it is politically motivated. And furthermore, what they're not telling you is the huge efforts going on by the Chinese government to promote Islam. Why does everyone leave this out? You can read about it. It's very public that they have built seminaries, they have built mosques. They are pouring huge amounts of money into developing the Islamic culture of the people in the Uyghur regions. They are spending loads of money to try and not to suppress Muslims in the Uyghur regions, but to support them. They're just not supporting the ones that want the violent overthrow of the Chinese government, right? You know, there are a lot of imams in Central Asia and in China who are not terrorists, who don't advocate violence and killing. They believe in Islam, but they also like the Chinese Communist Party. And the Chinese Communist Party is promoting these folks, building seminaries, you know, training them, giving them money, giving them, you know, why is that being ignored, right? That aspect of things, right? Meanwhile, there's a lot of people who are on Western media who it's like they've got some really awful stories. Right? And, I mean, do I know 100% that they're lying? No, I don't. You know, they could be telling the truth. You don't know, but you don't know. And I gotta tell you, you know, go to Miami, right? Go to Miami. There's all these Cubans. People, you know, Miami Cubans, they talk about them. Listen to Miami Cubans talk, right? Listen to them, right? Oh, you know, Fidel Castro killed my whole family and then ate us for dinner. He ate my cousin for dinner and I had to watch it. And Miami Cubans are known for telling tall tales, right? That's not to say that they didn't experience hardship. That's not to say that members, you know, that there weren't people that were executed after the revolution. But, you know, Miami Cubans, you listen to them talk, they don't exactly tell the gospel truth about what happened in Cuba, right? They're not exactly the greatest source of information. It's actually very similar to what went on with these hearings that the UN conducted regarding North Korea, right? You know, the UN was conducting these human rights hearings regarding human rights in North Korea. Well, it was pointed out, I believe, by one of my German colleagues when I was a UN reporter. One of my German colleagues pointed out to me that these hearings, actually, that were conducted in South Korea by the UN, in which people who had escaped or fled or been in North Korea testified, these hearings were actually given under duress. Why? South Korea has their national security laws, right? That in South Korea, it is illegal to say anything good about North Korea. In South Korea, if you get up and you say, you know, Kim Jong-il isn't so bad, you go to jail for like 2 years minimum, right? There was a young man in South Korea who retweeted, ironically, not even supporting, retweeted ironically stuff about North Korea, and he was given a 2-year prison sentence, right? The national security laws. Google the national security laws. You don't believe me? That's North Korean propaganda, Caleb. Google the South Korean national security laws. You say, I believe in communism in South Korea, you go to jail. You say, I believe in Marxism in South Korea, you go to jail. You say, I want, you know, peace with the North, you go to jail, right? Now, things are getting better, you know, but overall, those national security laws, you know, free speech in South Korea, yeah, forget it. So, the fact that the UN conducted these human rights hearings about alleged human rights violations in North Korea, in South Korea, all of that testimony should have been thrown out because it was all given. If they said anything good, they then, you know, could go to jail. It was given under the threat, under those national security laws. All the testimony should have been thrown out because that was given under duress, right? You know, it's invalid according to the UN's own rules. I thought that was fascinating. Richie Fork says, if I lived where you are doing this podcast, I would come out and meet you and shake your hand. Well, thank you, Richie. Sounds like South Korea has no room to talk, says Kyle. Well, yeah, I mean, things are getting better now. We saw the daughter of the dictator Park Chung-hee, you know, she was thrown out. We have Moon Jae-in. Things are moving ahead, but nobody ever talks about South Korea's national security laws. They are a huge restriction on people's human rights. And the fact that a lot of the testimony we get, a lot of the information we get about North Korea and alleged human rights violations in North Korea comes from people who are giving their testimony in a country where if they make the slightest pro-statement, if they say anything slightly in favor of the North, they can go to jail. That's a reality. Now, no one will ever point that out, right? It's just not included in the conversation. But anyhow, what else is on people's minds? What else is new? I'm enjoying the daylight while it lasts. You know, it's something about daylight in the wintertime, right? You know, in the summertime, it's light until really late and whatever, but, you know, it's only light, it's going to be, like, dark, you know, in an hour, less than an hour, it's going to start getting dark. But it's like something about the daylight in the wintertime just fills me with this joy, this exuberance, you know? I feel excited about life, you know? It just gives me this energy. I love the daylight in the wintertime. It's just something about it is just so special. And the fact that it's nice and warm, the fact that I'm not even wearing my winter coat, I'm in a good place right now. I figured I would share my happy moment with all of you here on YouTube Live. Let's talk about what's on people's minds. A lot to talk about. Oh boy. Oh boy, right? What is with the New York City subway system? I'll tell you. I mean, I waited the other night. I was trying to get home. And I waited and I waited and I waited, and then I finally get to the stop, and I'm thinking, okay, they're finally moving, and then they announce, oh, this train doesn't go. I had to take a taxi home. It was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. I was just trying to get home, and I ended up spending like 20 bucks because, and they say, well, they got a shuttle bus. Those shuttle buses, forget it, right? I mean, they stop every 2 seconds, you know, they add at least, you know, an hour or two to your trip. Just forget it. Russian Air Force in Venezuela. Yeah, that's another thing. So, Venezuela, right? You get a lot of leftists that admit, okay, Venezuela, that's, you know, an anti-imperialist progressive government. Venezuela and Russia are pretty close. You know, they're pretty close allies. You know, if Russia is supposed to be this monster, this evil thing, why are they so close to Venezuela? You know, and you know, I mean, if I'm a bad person for going to Russia and all of that, why is someone not a bad person for going to Venezuela? It's very weird. When I was in Venezuela, I noticed that a lot of the supporters of Maduro and of the United Socialist Party were quite socially conservative, and that's fine. I mean, they had their own personal beliefs. And I noticed that the Venezuelans were not stereotypical leftists. Trust me. If the average, you know, anarcho-Antifa person met a supporter, the typical supporter of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, they would probably call them a Nazbol, right? Just like they call me that. They would, you know, that leftism in the developing world is very, very different than leftism in Western countries. Leftism in Western countries has degenerated into kind of a middle-class, teenage, adolescent, angsty, I want to do my own thing and not listen to my parents. You know, it's very different, right? That you know, if you want to know what leftism is really like, look into Huey Long, look into Eugene Debs, you know, that's what leftism actually is. And this kind of I don't know what you want to call it. Since the 60s, there's been this post-leftism. Pasta says I was like that, and then I grew up. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the whole thing, is that leftism has kind of degenerated in the West into this kind of adolescent temper tantrum, you know, finding yourself and doing your own thing and not listening to your parents. That's not really what leftism is. Leftism is about wanting a better country and wanting the economy to be controlled and the centers of economic power to be controlled so that you can raise people up out of poverty. It's about loving your community and loving your neighborhood and your people and wanting to make a better life for them and wanting to control the economy in order to do it, right? You know, in fact, people don't realize this, but the Chinese Communist Party actually considers itself to be the true inheritors of the legacy of Dr. Sun Yat-sen. Bet you didn't know that, right? Dr. Sun Yat-sen, the founder of the KMT, right? His 3 principles were independence, democracy, and the people's livelihood. And the people's livelihood was largely interpreted to mean socialism, the people's livelihood. And at that point, you know, the interpretation, and actually, I bet you didn't know that Dr. Sun Yat-sen was not, he was an observer of the Communist International, and he was a friend of Lenin. And that the KMT was very much a progressive and social democratic or socialistic organization, the Chinese nationalist movement. Then it wasn't until Chiang Kai-shek came in and the communists were purged. It wasn't until then that the KMT became reactionary. And at that point, the communists then took up the banner. They said, well, if you really want, to carry out the vision of Dr. Sun Yat-sen of making an independent, democratic, and progressive China in which the people's livelihood comes first, then you got to join with the communists. But the Communist Party, they were members of the KMT, they had a faction, and, the KMT received loads of support from the Soviet Union. They were observers, they got military training from the Soviet Union. The KMT, when it began, was something that Lenin and all of them particularly liked. Now, they weren't Marxist-Leninists, they were not actual members of the Communist International because they at that point did not, agree with the 21 points that Lenin had put forward. But the Communist International had no problem whatsoever supporting the KMT, aligning with the KMT, and that was a good thing. And it was only when the KMT was taken over by Chiang Kai-shek and began persecuting the communists, that was when the issue went bad. And the Trotskyist vision, right, that instead of supporting the KMT, which is where all the very serious Marxists in China, all the people in China who wanted to make a better country, all the progressive Chinese people were joining the KMT. The idea that they shouldn't have joined it and instead should have organized like all 3 of China's railroad workers back then is ridiculous, right? That in order to grow and really gain energy, the Chinese Communist Party had to join the KMT. It was a strategic decision. Then when the KMT went bad with the rise of Chiang Kai-shek, at that point they were in the countryside, you had the People's War and all of that, but that's really what went on. And that in a lot of ways the Chinese Communist Party are the true inheritors of the KMT's legacy. And the wife of Sun Yat-sen, Madame Sun Yat-sen, ended up becoming a communist. I bet you didn't know that. Madame Sun Yat-sen, the wife of Sun Yat-sen, joined the Communist Party. She felt they were the true inheritors of the communist vision. So that history is just kind of obscured. If you read, Cultural Revolution era, like ultra-Maoist literature, you'd think, that the KMT was always just the blood enemy of communists. You listen to Trotskyite literature and Trotsky's delusional interpretation, the KMT was evil and Stalin sold the Chinese revolution down the river, by telling them to support the KMT. That's not the case at all. The KMT was a pretty good group, and in a lot of ways, the Chinese Communist Party is the true inheritors. They are the true inheritors of Dr. Sun Yat-sen's vision. However, the only way to actually carry it out was by creating full socialism in China. And with the Marxist-Leninist understanding that Mao and others had, they were able to really carry out the vision and program of the KMT. Bet you didn't know that. But what else is on people's minds? I'm gonna have to wrap this up pretty soon, but I'm having a good time. It's still lovely daylight. And does anyone ever harass you on the street? Yes, unfortunately, but this is New York City, there's a lot of nutty people on the street talking to themselves and yelling. I'm talking into a phone, I'm talking about politics, so, I'm a little bit better than a lot of things, but trust me, walk on the streets of New York City for long enough, you're gonna see all kinds of things. I'm the least of people's concerns. Trust me. Julian Assange. Yes, I'm worried about Julian Assange. I don't know what's going to happen there, and it's on my mind. And if they're able to imprison Julian Assange, that'll be the first time they've gone after a publisher. He's not the leaker of the information he published, right? He just published what other people gave him, and that'll have a chill effect. At that point, that'll make all kinds of press very afraid to publish anything the government doesn't approve of. It's one thing to lock up leakers, people who violate national security laws, give information out that they're not supposed to give. People who give out classified government info, right? Technically, right, that's one thing. Those kind of folks have been jailed before, Chelsea Manning, among others. But if they're able to go after Julian Assange, who didn't leak anything, he just published it, that'll be big. That'll be very, very, very big. Julian Assange, I'm curious to see. I keep hearing all these reports. Julian Assange is about to be turned over, and then it doesn't happen. Something's going on, right? We haven't heard from him. We know about Ecuador. Something's going on behind the scenes. I don't know what's going on. It's quite fascinating. But anyhow, what else is on people's minds? I'm just having a lovely chat here. It's a lovely afternoon. Now, some people say that there is something going on with the Clinton Foundation, right? That they are moving ahead on that investigation, right? Who can disagree with the golden rule if you practice it? Well, sure. If Venezuela enjoys the support of the Russians, it will be very difficult for the U.S. to implement a regime change program. That's true, right? And that's the whole thing, is Russia and China have really doubled down in supporting Venezuela, right? Both countries have been very, very supportive of Venezuela and the Bolivarian Revolution. And if they didn't have that kind of international support, it could very well be the case that the USA would have backed Colombia in invading already and all of that. Do folks remember when they tried to kill Maduro with a drone? Do folks remember that? This shows you how much American mainstream media is just complete. So there was a public event A drone flew in, and it was shot down by the snipers, you know, in Venezuela. They shot down this drone that was trying to kill Maduro. And it was a big incident, and it was on live TV, and there was a huge crowd of people, the army. It was big, right? So they tried to kill Maduro with a drone, you know, and after that happened, just, you know, within like an hour of it happening, the Associated Press came out with this report. I don't know if people saw, came out with this report saying that, oh, you know, this was actually a gas explosion, and that the claims that there was some kind of drone strike, drone attempt against Maduro, this is just propaganda from Venezuela. Like an hour afterwards, all of a sudden it's on Associated Press and all this. Oh, anonymous officials told us, so they don't name a source, that this is actually just, you know, this is just Maduro propaganda. In reality, it was just a gas explosion. Well, now we have video of the drone, right? He addressed the country. In front of the whole country on live TV, they tried to kill the president of Venezuela with a drone, and then the Associated Press with an anonymous source, no, it was just a gas explosion. We all know it. The whole world knows it wasn't a gas explosion. But who called up the Associated Press and gave them this anonymous information so quickly? And then they just ran with it, even though everyone there saw the drones. They saw them shoot down the drone. I mean, it was just like, it was so obvious that had happened. And they've backed away from it since then. Now that we have the video and all that, everyone acknowledges, yes, there was an attempted drone attack on the president of Venezuela. It happened. But before that, they really tried to say it didn't happen, right? Really. You know, it's so funny. If you get up and you question the narrative of 9/11, you're a conspiracy theorist, you know? If you get up and say stuff about the JFK assassination, you're a conspiracy theorist. But right after, the whole world watched an attempted killing of Maduro, the president of Venezuela, with a drone, within an hour, they're already running conspiracy theories saying it didn't happen, right? They immediately were trying to tell us the official story wasn't true already. And you should see the right-wing Venezuelans, oh my God, all over Twitter, and it's amazing. You should, like Huffington Post, different like mainstream outlets have been trying to claim that it was an inside job. I kid you not, that it was an inside job. Maduro staged a fake drone attack to create sympathy for himself. All kinds of stuff that you can't do about the U.S. government. I mean, immediately, they just don't want to acknowledge that some forces tried to kill Maduro with a drone. It happened, the whole world saw it, and there's a huge wave of denial and conspiracy theories about it. It's not a conspiracy theory if it's against an anti-imperialist government. It's beyond me. I know there's some individual who's on social media who gets a lot of play, and they treat her like she's an expert on Russia. Her name's Louise Mensch. She says crazy, crazy things, crazy conspiracy theories, just outrageous theories about Russia, but yet she's treated as legitimate. If I were to make some of the claims that she made about Russia, about the U.S. government, I would be on the level of Alex Jones, right? I mean, it's something special. It's not a conspiracy theory if it's against a government we don't like. If it's against the U.S. government, it's a conspiracy theory. If it's questioning the narrative of American media, it's a conspiracy theory. However, you know, if you want, you can say all kinds of stuff, right? Maduro staged a drone attack against himself, or the drone attack never happened because, I don't know, an unnamed source. I mean, it's ridiculous. The double standard is ridiculous. Now we've gone full circle. Now we're back to what I said before about how people only get angry and only have outrage when they're told to, right? People that would never question anything the U.S. government tells them, all of a sudden, you know, Maduro gets attacked by a drone. I don't know. How do you know he wasn't faking it just to serve his own agenda? All of a sudden, they turn into a conspiracy theorist when it's against somebody they don't like. Crazy, crazy times. People's minds are so conforming. That was a thing that, like, Noam Chomsky and some of these forces talked about you know, Noam Chomsky and others talked about how, you know, like, if you really want to believe that people are stupid, but if you can, but in reality people are smart, they're just conforming. He talks about, like, for example, sports fans. Sports fans get really intelligent, right? They know a lot, they work really hard. You know, the laws of baseball, for example, you have to have, you know, lawyers interpret them. There's, you know, the sports is something that, you know, I mean, you know, it's very intelligent, but it's a safe place to put your intelligence. People that would never question anything about politics, you know, they will absolutely question things about sports, get fired up. And sports is a place that people can use their brain, and it's safe, right? Now, I don't agree with Noam Chomsky on a lot, and people have shown that he's said a lot of things about Syria and other things that I don't agree with. That's one point that he made. I think it was in the documentary Manufacturing Consent, that people are intelligent. They do question things. They do have the ability to think analytically. They just save it for an avenue that's safe, like sports, right? People get very fired up and emotional about it because it's sports. No one really cares at the end of the day, right? There's no serious consequence for thinking about sports, for having a strong opinion about sports, for doing huge amounts of research about sports and athletics. There's no serious consequence for doing that kind of thing. But what else is on people's minds? I'm going to wrap this up pretty soon. But yes, someone pointed out Chomsky is dodgy. Yes, there's been times, I mean, he said he's dodgy. That's funny. I mean, my encounter with him, you can type in Caleb Maupin, Noam Chomsky into YouTube. You can watch my encounter with him, where I asked him about the U.S. about the Israelis attacking and killing nuclear scientists in Iran, and you can see how he answered my question with the 4 Ds of dodgeball: dip, dodge, duck, and dodge. I mean, it was pretty crazy. I mean, he knows what he's doing, and Noam Chomsky, he's not where I'm at politically. Let me put it that way. And he was with Amy Goodman, another force that's certainly not where I'm at politically. But they have some insights. That was where I started out. I remember when I was in high school, I must have watched Democracy Now! Every day. If I could get to a computer, if I, was able to get to a computer during my lunch break, and, I was like sneaking into a classroom, I was watching Democracy Now! Every day. I thought they were the best. They were the cutting edge. Now, you watch them now, it's just the most straight up liberal, kind of stuff you've ever seen. It's weird. It's kind of, it's very similar to InfoWars. InfoWars, go back a couple of years, they've always had their conservative worldview, and they've always been, right-wing, anti-communist, anti-immigrant and such. But they were criticizing the establishment, and they talk about regime change operations. And it feels like in the last couple of years, Democracy Now! And InfoWars have become blatantly partisan. If you watch Democracy Now! At this point, it's nothing but anti-Trump. Trump is evil, Trump is the apocalypse, Trump, stop Trump. Meanwhile, if you look at InfoWars, in the last few months, it's nothing but pro-Trump, like they're defending Trump. It's a little odd. But listen, my stabilizer is out, and so I'm going to wrap this up. So I wish you all the best. You are all my friends, and I'll talk to you all soon. Talk to you